Hey there, ever find yourself pulling out your wallet even when you know you don't really need anything?
It's like our brains have a mind of their own.
Totally. And today, we're going deep into that sneaky psychology of spending with Dan Ariely's Dollars and Cents.
Oh, this is a good one. ARIELY's a genius at uncovering those hidden forces that make us spend more than we think.
Right. Get ready for some serious aha moments.
Oh.
We're talking about those psychological traps that trick us into overspending.
And he explains it all in such an engaging way.
He really does. So, to kick things off, let's start with a place we all associate with spending: casinos.
Casinos are like playgrounds for psychological tricks designed to loosen your grip on your wallet.
So true. And one of the biggest ones, I think, has got to be the illusion of free stuff. Free drinks, free parking, all those comps they use to lure you in.
Ah, yes, the infamous freebies. They get you in the door, but they also, let's be honest, they kind of mess with your better judgment.
It's like they throw those free drinks at you, you get caught up in the excitement, and suddenly you're at the blackjack table betting more than you ever intended.
Exactly. Those freebies, they're not really free, are they? Think of them more like a nudge, a gentle push towards making impulsive decisions. They activate the reward centers in our brain.
It's like our brains are wired to chase those immediate rewards without fully considering the long-term consequences.
Right, and casinos are masters at exploiting that.
Okay, so it's not just about the free drinks clouding our judgment at the roulette wheel, right? What about applying this free trap to everyday life? Outside the casino.
Oh, it's everywhere. Think about those tempting buy one, get one free deals at your favorite store, or those online retailers dangling free shipping in front of you.
Like they know we're hardwired to jump at anything that sounds free.
Exactly. And before you know it, you've walked out with a shopping cart full of things you never even knew you needed, or your online shopping cart is overflowing.
And those seemingly small extras, those free things, they can really add up over time.
Absolutely. So the real takeaway here is always be wary of the hidden costs associated with free, because there's always a price to pay, whether it's overspending, clutter in your home, or even just a little bit of buyer's remorse.
Okay, I'm definitely guilty of falling for the free trap, but here's another one that always gets me: relativity.
Ah, yes, relativity. It completely messes with how our brains perceive value. We tend to judge the worth of something based on its comparison to other things rather than its actual value.
It's like that classic retail tactic where they mark up the regular price to make the sale price seem like a steal.
Oh, absolutely. JCPenney, for example, they were masters at that.
It's all a game of comparison, isn't it?
Absolutely. It plays on those innate comparisons our brains are constantly making.
It's like that old saying, everything's relative. We're always comparing prices, products, features.
Right. And it's not just about material possessions either. We compare our lives, our accomplishments, even our relationships.
And that can be a dangerous game, especially in the age of social media, where everyone's constantly curating their highlight reels.
Exactly. This constant comparison game can really take a toll on our happiness, leading us to chase after things we don't truly value just because someone else has them.
So how do we escape this comparison trap? Should we all just delete our social media accounts and live in a self-sufficient bubble?
Well, while that might sound tempting sometimes, a more practical approach is to start by recognizing that our value system shouldn't be based on what others have or what's considered normal. It's about defining what's truly important to us, what brings us joy, what aligns with our values.
So it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, it's about figuring out what truly matters to us.
Exactly. It's about defining our own version of success and happiness. Once we have that clear sense of our own priorities, we're less likely to get swept up in those external comparisons.
I love that. It's about tuning out the noise and focusing on what truly resonates with us. All right, now let's unpack another fascinating concept from Dollars and Cents: mental accounting.
Ah, yes. Mental accounting. It's a way to simplify our finances, but it often leads us to some, shall we say, interesting behavior. It's all about how we categorize money in our minds.
It's like we have these separate mental accounts for different spending categories, right? Like a groceries account, an entertainment account.
Exactly. Picture those old school filing cabinets with each drawer labeled for a specific expense. You've got your drawer for groceries, one for entertainment, another for, say, emergencies.
And even though it's all coming from the same bank account, we treat it differently depending on which mental drawer we're pulling from.
Precisely. We might hesitate to spend an extra dollar on groceries, but then turn around and blow our budget on a fancy dinner because it falls under a different category in our minds.
So our brains are basically tricking us into thinking these arbitrary categories actually matter.
In a way, yes. And ARIEly highlights some truly eye-opening examples of how this plays out in our everyday lives. Think about how people treat money they win at a casino or money they receive as a gift. They're often far more willing to spend it freely compared to, say, money earned from their regular job.
Because it feels like bonus money, right?
Exactly. Our brains assign different values to money based on its source, even though at the end of the day, it all spends the same.
Oh, and don't even get me started on those tax refunds. It's like people see that big deposit hit their account and think, shopping spree. Completely forgetting it was their money in the first place.
You've hit the nail on the head. Tax refunds are a prime example of how this mental accounting can really distort our perception. We treat it as a bonus, a windfall, when it's simply a return of our own hard-earned cash.
So how do we break free from these mental accounting traps? It sounds like we need to find a way to see all our money as equal, no matter where it came from or what label we've mentally assigned to it.
Precisely. It's about shifting our perspective and adopting a more holistic view of our finances. We need to break free from those mental silos and consider our overall financial well-being.
It's about recognizing that, at the end of the day, money is fungible, right? It all spends the same, regardless of where it came from.
Exactly. A dollar is a dollar is a dollar. Now, speaking of ways we trick ourselves when it comes to money, let's talk about the very real pain of paying.
The pain of paying. Tell me more.
Well, it's almost like our brains have this built-in alarm system that goes off every time we spend money. It's a visceral reminder of the sacrifice we're making. And the less we feel that pain, well, the more likely we are to overspend.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this. Think about those all-inclusive vacations. It's so easy to overspend because every meal, every cocktail, it all feels free.
Exactly. Since you're not constantly reminded of the financial transaction taking place, you're less likely to experience that pain of paying and might be more inclined to indulge.
So paying with a credit card is basically like taking a painkiller for our spending habits.
You could say that. When you swipe that credit card, the pain of paying is delayed. It's not as immediate or tangible, making it much easier to spend more than you intended.
And it's not just when we pay, but how we pay. Take gift cards, for instance.
Gift cards are a great example. They're specifically designed to make spending, let's say, a little too easy. Because we've already pre-allocated that money to a specific purpose or retailer, we don't experience that usual hesitation when it's time to swipe.
It's like we've given ourselves permission to spend freely because, hey, it's a gift card.
Exactly. It's all psychological. But that doesn't mean we should swear off all forms of convenient payment, right? Credit cards and gift cards exist for a reason.
Exactly. I wouldn't want to give up my cashback rewards, so what's the solution here?
Awareness. Be mindful of how different payment methods might be influencing your spending habits. If you're trying to curb impulse purchases, maybe try using cash more often. It's a good way to bring back a bit of that pain of paying in a healthy way.
That's a great idea. It's like a built-in reality check every time you open your wallet. Now, are you ready to dive into a few more of these psychological quirks that affect our spending? Okay, you got me hooked on these psychological quirks. What other spending traps do we need to watch out for?
Well, have you ever heard of anchoring?
Anchoring.
It's this fascinating concept where a specific price gets stuck in our heads and becomes the baseline for how much we think something should cost, even if it's not a rational measure of value.
Oh, I've totally experienced that. Like, if I see a fancy latte advertised for $7, suddenly the $5 latte at my local coffee shop doesn't seem so bad.
Exactly. That $7 latte acted as an anchor.
Even though I used to think $5 was outrageous.
It's like our brains latch on to that first price point and use it as a reference, even if it's not a fair comparison.
So how do we avoid getting anchored to these arbitrary prices? Should we just forget everything we thought we knew about how much things cost?
Well, you don't have to erase your entire knowledge of pricing. Just be aware of how this anchoring effect might be influencing your decisions. The next time you're shopping for something and you see a price tag, take a moment. Ask yourself, am I being swayed by an anchor right now? Is this price truly a reflection of the item's value, or am I letting myself be influenced by an arbitrary number?
So do your research, shop around.
Exactly. Don't let that one price tag dictate your spending decisions.
It's like what you said about those free offers.
Yeah.
We really need to dig deeper, find out the real cost, not just the perceived cost.
Absolutely. And speaking of those sneaky psychological biases, are you ready to dive into another one?
Hit me with it. I'm ready to outsmart my brain.
All right, let's talk about the endowment effect. It's this quirk of human psychology where we tend to overvalue the things we own simply because we own them.
Oh, I know this one all too well. It's that voice in the back of my head that says, don't get rid of that. It might come in handy someday, even if it's just collecting dust in the attic.
Exactly. We form these emotional attachments to our possessions, often imbuing them with a sentimental value that may not be there for someone else.
We see them through rose-colored glasses. It's like that old t-shirt from high school. Sure, it's faded, a little snug, maybe even has a hole or two.
But hey, it reminds you of those Friday night football games.
Exactly. Those were the days. But realistically, would anyone else want to buy it? Probably not.
Probably not for the price you have in mind. We often overestimate the monetary value of our belongings, especially when it's time to part with them.
It's like we're emotionally attached to that old lamp, even if it clashes with our decor.
Absolutely. Sentimentality can be a powerful force when it comes to our spending habits.
So how do we overcome this endowment effect? It sounds like a recipe for holding on to things and their potential value for far too long.
It all starts with perspective. Try to be objective. Imagine you're the buyer, not the seller. If you were seeing this item for the first time, would you pay that much for it?
That's a great point. It's about detaching from that emotional connection and looking at it with fresh eyes.
Exactly. And sometimes the most rational decision is to simply let go of things that no longer serve us. It's like decluttering our homes and our minds.
I love that. Out with the old and in with the new, right? Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another factor that influences our spending expectations.
Ah, yes. Expectations. Those mental movies we create in our heads, shaping how we think something should be.
It's like when you hear rave reviews about a certain restaurant and you go in with these sky-high expectations, but then
The food falls flat.
totally. Or maybe the service is terrible. The experience simply doesn't live up to the hype and you're left feeling disappointed.
Precisely. Our expectations can have a huge impact on how much we're willing to spend and how satisfied we are with our purchases.
Like that bottle of wine that everyone says is exceptional, so you shell out big bucks for it, but then you're like, wait, is that it? It's good, but...
But not worth the price tag.
Exactly. And it's not just about our experiences, right? Think about brand name products versus generic brands.
Oh, absolutely. We're often willing to pay a premium for a brand name, even if the quality is comparable to a more affordable alternative.
Because we've already assigned a certain level of quality or prestige to that brand just based on its reputation or marketing.
Precisely. It's the power of perception. But remember, it doesn't mean those generic brands are inferior.
So should we go into everything with low expectations? Is that the key to avoiding disappointment?
It's not about lowering your standards, but rather about being aware of how your expectations might be shaping your experiences. Go ahead, have high hopes, but don't let your preconceived notions dictate your enjoyment or drain your bank account. Be open to being pleasantly surprised.
I love that. Don't let those mental movies limit your enjoyment. Speaking of emotions, what about fear?
Fear, a powerful motivator, especially when it comes to our spending habits, specifically the fear of missing out, or what we call loss aversion.
Oh, loss aversion. That explains why we're so tempted by those limited time offers. We don't want to miss out on a good deal, even if we don't really need the item.
Exactly. Our brains are hardwired to avoid loss more than they are to seek gain. We experience the pain of a loss far more intensely than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So if we're presented with two options, one framed as a potential gain and the other as a potential loss, we're naturally drawn to the option that helps us avoid that loss, even if it's not the most logical choice.
Exactly. And this fear of missing out can lead us to make some pretty irrational financial decisions.
Like sticking with a low-yield savings account because we're terrified of investing in the stock market, even though we know, rationally, that investing could yield much better returns over the long run.
You got it. We become so fixated on what we might lose that we fail to see the potential gains.
So how do we break free from this fear-driven mindset?
It's all about reframing the way we think about money and risk. It's about shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Instead of focusing on what we might lose, let's explore the potential gains.
So it's like focusing on the possibility of a sunny day, even though there's a chance of rain.
Exactly. Embrace the possibilities. Don't let fear hold you back from making smart financial decisions.
I love that shift in perspective. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that's been on my mind. We spent a lot of time talking about all the ways our brains trick us with money. But what about our overall relationship with money?
That's such an important point. Our relationship with money is complex, multifaceted.
It's not just about the numbers.
Exactly. It's about our beliefs, our values, our emotions. And sometimes, without even realizing it, we place too much emphasis on money as a measure of our self-worth.
It becomes this equation in our heads, right? Like the more money we have, the more successful, the more valuable we are.
Precisely. And it can trap us in this vicious cycle of comparison and overspending. We compare our bank accounts to others and we feel inadequate. And then we overspend, trying to keep up, often ending up in debt.
It's like we're chasing after this elusive sense of security and validation through material possessions and external validation.
Exactly. And it can be exhausting, not to mention financially draining.
So how do we break free from this unhealthy obsession with money? How do we shift our perspective to a healthier, more balanced relationship?
It starts with recognizing that money is simply a tool, a means to an end.
It's not the source of happiness or fulfillment.
Right. True fulfillment comes from connecting with our values, pursuing our passions, nurturing our relationships. It's about finding joy in the experiences and connections that truly matter, the things money can't buy.
Spending time with loved ones, exploring new places, pursuing creative endeavors, giving back to our communities. These are the things that make life rich and meaningful.
Absolutely. And money is just a resource that can help facilitate those things.
I love that perspective. It's not about denying the role of money in our lives, but rather about putting it in its proper place. It's about recognizing that true wealth isn't measured by the size of your bank account, but by the richness of your experiences and the depth of your connections.
Perfectly said.
Okay, so we've explored all these fascinating and kind of scary ways our brains can sabotage our spending habits. But now for the empowering part. What can we actually do about it? How do we outsmart our own brains?
Well, the good news is ARIELY doesn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of mind-boggling psychological puzzles to solve. Dollars and Cents is packed with really practical advice, too.
Okay, good. Because I'm ready to take control.
Yeah.
So where do we start?
Well, we talked about those credit cards and how they can kind of dull that pain of paying, right? Making it way too easy to overspend without even realizing it.
Yeah, so are you suggesting we all go cold turkey and cut up our credit cards?
Well, it's not always the most practical solution for everyone, but yeah, finding ways to reduce our reliance on plastic can definitely be a game changer for a lot of people. How about a little spending detox?
Ooh, I like the sound of that. Tell me more.
It's simple. Try using cash more often. I know. It might seem a bit old-fashioned in this digital age, but there's something about that tangible act of handing over physical bills that really makes you think twice.
It brings back that pain of paying we were talking about.
Exactly. It's a good way to reconnect with the real cost of things. And if you're not quite ready to ditch the plastic entirely, at least set some firm limits for yourself.
Create a budget and actually stick to it.
You got it. Don't let those credit card statements dictate your spending. Take control.
Speaking of budgets, are those still relevant? It seems like everyone's using budgeting apps these days. Do people still use those old-fashioned pen and paper budgets?
Absolutely. Budgeting apps can be super helpful, but the underlying principle is the same. It's all about creating a clear picture of your income and expenses so you can track where your money is going each month.
It's like a roadmap for your finances.
Precisely. A well-thought-out budget helps you prioritize, making sure you're spending in a way that aligns with your values.
And helps you reach your financial goals.
Exactly. And hey, if a budgeting app makes it more fun and engaging, go for it.
So no more excuses about those complicated spreadsheet formulas.
None whatsoever. There are tons of tools and resources out there, so find what works for you. Just make it a regular part of your routine.
Okay, so budgeting is key. Now, what about those sneaky psychological traps we talked about earlier, like the anchoring effect or relativity? Those felt a little unavoidable. Any tips for outsmarting our own brains?
Well, we can't exactly rewire our neural pathways overnight, but becoming more aware of these biases is a huge first step. So the next time you're about to make a purchase, hit that pause button for a second.
I like to call it a spending sanity check.
I love that. Ask yourself those key questions. Is this something I truly need or want, or am I just being swayed by a clever marketing tactic? Am I letting an anchor price cloud my judgment? Am I comparing myself to others and feeling pressured to keep up?
It's like creating a mental checklist to combat those impulse purchases.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to do your research. Compare prices, read reviews, ask friends for recommendations. Become a more informed and discerning consumer.
Be a savvy shopper. It's like you said earlier, knowledge is power. And speaking of knowledge, I think it's time we revisit the importance of playing the long game when it comes to our finances.
Yes, delaying gratification, making choices that benefit our future selves, even if it means sacrificing a little bit of immediate pleasure.
It's about looking beyond that instant gratification purchase and really thinking about the long-term impact on our finances, right?
Exactly. Think about things like retirement savings. It's not always the most exciting or glamorous topic, but it's essential. It's about having the discipline to set aside money today to secure a comfortable future.
It's like planting a tree, knowing you might not get to fully enjoy the shade for years to come, but future generations will.
What a beautiful analogy. And this principle applies to all areas of our finances: saving for a down payment, paying off debt, investing in our education. These are all long-term goals that often require making sacrifices in the present.
It's about choosing to invest in our future selves, even when our present selves would rather splurge on that new gadget or fancy vacation.
Exactly. It's a mindset shift, for sure.
But what if we're feeling overwhelmed? Like, it's just all too much to handle.
You are definitely not alone. Managing your finances can feel daunting, but the good news is you don't have to navigate it all by yourself.
So what do we do? Where do we go for help?
Well, talk to a financial advisor, find a support group, or even just ask a trusted friend or family member to be your accountability partner, someone who can help you stay motivated and on track.
It's like having a financial cheerleader in your corner.
I like that. Someone to celebrate your wins with and offer support when you need a little extra nudge.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, but before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, the importance of finding joy in this process. Because it's not just about pinching pennies and denying ourselves, right? It's about using our finances as a tool to create a life that feels both meaningful and fulfilling.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Yes, spend time with loved ones, pursue your passions, give back to your community. These are the things that truly matter.
So it's not about depriving ourselves. It's about making conscious choices that align with our values.
Exactly. Use your financial resources as a tool to craft a life that feels authentically you.
I love that. So for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to transform their relationship with money, to finally break free from those overspending habits and take control of their financial well-being, what's the most important thing to remember?
Remember that knowledge is power. Now that you're aware of those sneaky mental biases that can sabotage your spending, you're in a much better position to make more conscious, intentional choices about your money.
It's like we've shed light on those hidden spending traps, and now we can navigate our finances with more confidence.
Absolutely. And the next time you're tempted to make an impulse purchase, just take a breath, pause, and ask yourself that all-important question: is this truly worth it, or am I falling for one of my brain's sneaky little tricks?
It's time to take back control. It's time to rewrite our own dollars and cents story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've gained some valuable insights into the fascinating and sometimes frustrating world of personal finance. Remember, keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.